There's been a lot of talk about the current state of comic book films and the pressure that exists with these future projects coming out. You've got your typical discussions on the state of the MCU. Oh, the MCU is dead. We're back, yet it's so over at the same time. Honestly, if a movie like Deadpool and Wolverine bombs, which I don't see becoming a reality, Marvel Studios is still going to be able to produce a handful of their major projects set in stone, like X-Men and Fantastic Four. DC, on the other hand?
If I speak, I am in big trouble. In big trouble, and I don't want to be in big trouble.
Any pressure on those films is nothing in comparison to the pressure with the start of James Gunn's DCU and Superman. You're coming in after a previous 10-year run on a disjointed universe to the point where the general public has nearly lost all interest, so this new universe has to do a lot of heavy lifting to revitalize the DC brand. Because the sad fact is, these live action depictions are the most popular versions of these characters and their mythos. So if a series of movies are terrible and continuously mishandle their A-listers, wrap it up, bucko, it's over. If this new DCU fails, we ain't getting nothing but Batman projects for the next decade. I can understand the skepticism with James Gunn and Peter Safran being appointed co-CEOs of DC Studios, but if I'm gonna keep it a buck, when I heard James Gunn was running DC, I was on board, not even gonna lie. James Gunn running the future of DC, I'm like, hey,
I'm interested.
Understandably, since the DCEU had been straight dookie for about a decade, you've got average folk who don't care too much about what's going on. I don't really care for the new DCU, no one really cares about the new Superman or the Authority.
Well, I do.
Ever since Warner Brothers officially merged with Discovery and David Zaslav took over, he talked about wanting to revitalize some of their biggest IPs, which included DC, and hiring someone to take on a Kevin Feige-esque role for an 8 to 10 year plan for DC films. I remember the possibilities of Dan Lin taking over, rumors on Greg Berlanti, the guy behind the CW Arrowverse, taking charge, so thank God that never happened. James Gunn, to me, created the two best DCU projects with the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. You can find me and we can box over that one, I don't even care. And he cooked with the Guardians films over at Marvel, so I'm like, hey bro, let him cook. It's hysterical when internet folk determine whether or not a movie is good based on its box office results and not the actual quality of the film. The Suicide Squad can't be a good movie because it bombed at the box office. Probably because the movie came out during the peak of the pandemic? Like, does everyone just forget how this movie released during a time period when there was a new strain of the virus spreading about? It came to the point that for every single Warner Brothers release in 2021, the films were released on HBO Max the same day they would in theaters. So what do you think? Do you believe the average person would risk catching a virus to go to a theater or sit in the comfort of their own home and watch a newly released film on a streaming service? The downfall of the DCEU can simply be narrowed down to the meddling and incompetence of WB executives themselves. Imagine with the MCU there was no Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige, but instead Bob Iger and his lackeys were making huge creative decisions at Marvel. Yeah, that sounds like a complete and utter disaster. Well, that's pretty much what happened with DC. You had some people come and go like Jeff Johns and Walter Hamada as people in charge of DC films in some way, but look how that turned out. And I think one of the elements that allowed me to be a bit more optimistic is how there is actually a DC Studios under the Warner Brothers Discovery umbrella, which is a separate entity under WB and dedicated to the production of all things DC across animation, film, and TV. And the equivalent to Kevin Feige's role is split in two, with James Gunn in charge of the creative side of things and Peter Safran the business side. So it's not like what it was previously, where WB executives could come in and invoke all these changes like they did with the DCEU films, kind of like what they did to Justice League, for example, or cutting 30 minutes out of BVS. One thing that stands out to me when it comes to James Gunn's position at DC is how familiar he is with the comics and the source material. Now, sure, you'll have people behind these films who pretend to read comics, but what makes me so sure that's not the case with Gunn is if you go to any of his social media platforms, you'd see him post anniversary posts of comic characters, inviting a whole bunch of comic artists and writers onto the set of Superman, like Scott Snyder, Jim Lee, Joshua Williamson, just to name a few. Maybe you'd see him list some of his favorite books from the New 52, and more notably some of the inspirations for the upcoming movies and shows in Chapter 1. Giving light to those comics has a more positive outlook, because if he simply gives light to a Wonder Woman Black Label book, for example, that book would become one of the best-selling on Amazon for a brief period. That was even more apparent during his initial slate announcement, with Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow selling like hotcakes after the movie adaptation was announced. It's nice to see this breath of fresh air and actually not being ashamed or embarrassed of comic roots, unlike the producers at Marvel Studios who are so hell-bent on comic inaccuracy. They'd literally tell some of their writers to not read the source material of the book they're supposedly adapting with the same name. Or when the producer Nate more specifically stated how they make sure they don't hire writers or directors who are familiar with Marvel Comics. Meanwhile, you've got DC comic writers like Tom King being part of the creative process and the overall vision for the DCU. Like I said earlier, I think it's fine to be a bit skeptical considering we've been enduring DCEU slop for the past decade or so. It is a little funny to see some of those concerns stem from, oh, I don't like some of the comedic elements in Peacemaker, but I'm not sure why you'd assume Clark Kent would be making the same jokes akin to that of the Peacemaker character. While Gunn is writing a couple of projects like Superman and Creature Commandos, there are a good amount of other writers and creatives tackling these projects. So even if you don't like James Gunn's style, that won't be seen in every single project. A really big emphasis in the creative process of this universe is to make sure it's not the Gunverse, even though these stories are connected in the same continuity. It's not going to feel like major homework just to watch every single project, and the creatives get to implement their artistic vision in the projects they're tackling.
Now that that's happening, it's relatively new. The same thing with Marvel. I mean, even MCU is relatively new. So I don't know if there's any innate things about tone, because I think that what both MCU and DCU need to do is to have a wider range of tones than they presently do.
At first it looks a little odd on some of the choices made for the revealed slate of the first chapter, like nobody knows about the Authority or Creature Commandos.
Who the fuck is this?
This isn't even all the projects for Chapter 1. According to Gunn, the 10 projects that were revealed, which consisted of 5 TV shows and 5 movies, was less than half of the total projects in the first chapter. On top of that, the overall layout of Chapter 2 has been set in stone for the most part. One of the things I severely disliked about the Snyderverse was how Gotham and Metropolis were depicted. We already know Snyder did not cook with his interpretation of Superman, and some of the problems with that iteration include the lack of chemistry between Clark Kent and Lois Lane, and the lack of emphasis on the Daily Planet cast. They don't turn Jimmy Olsen, Superman's best pal, into a freaking CIA operative and killed him in the first 10 minutes of Batman vs Superman. We barely get to see Clark interact with Perry White. There's no mention of Steve Lombard, Cat Grant, not a lot of screen time with Clark being a good reporter. Metropolis is very known for its very vibrant architecture, reflecting a sense of grandeur and optimism, really honing in on the city of tomorrow aspect with towering skyscrapers and everything. In the Snyderverse, Metropolis just looks like generic city number 35 that's a ripoff of Chicago. Unironically, what the Daily Planet looks like in the DCEU. It's not even seen in the movies. This is from a freaking airline commercial.
That shit stank, don't it? Ugh.
Absolutely no sauce with their Metropolis. Not to mention they made Gotham and Metropolis freaking sister cities, with them just being a harbor apart from one another. On the flip side, from what we've seen with some recent set photos of Metropolis in the new Superman movie, it seems as if they're going in the complete opposite direction. Metropolis is definitely giving off a retro futuristic vibe going on in the city. The Daily Planet confirmed to have the giant globe on the top of the building. It's just nice to see an adaptation actually giving light to some of the other Superman side characters from the Daily Planet. I don't know how large of a role they'll play in the film, but it's nice to see them regardless. The castings for this movie have been consistent bangers. You're lying if you think there's a single miss of a casting in this movie. They got Rachel Brosnahan, aka Midge Maisel, as Lois Lane. That alone says a lot of what they're trying to accomplish. And you know for a damn fact we about to get the best Lex Luthor in live action, since Michael Rosenbaum played him in Smallville.
You are the best Lex. Let's admit it. We know you're the best Lex.
Come on, you're being funny.
I'm not being funny. You're definitely the best Lex.
Really?
Definitely.
If there were a Lex Luthor, promise me this. He'll have gravitas, or he'll be Lex Luthor. He won't be playing Lex Luthor, but he's more acting like this character or this or goofy or crazy.
Well, I think the first ever Lex I saw was you. Yeah. I grew up, like, Smallville was on, I can't remember if it was Channel 4 or Channel 5, but like growing up, like the show that I would watch and see my first iterations of Superman and Lex and all those stories. So
really?
It's kind of bizarre to be
I was the first.
You were, yeah, but you're like the one. So it's bizarre for me.
Really? So you like
here.
My portrayal?
I love it. Are you kidding? It's the best, yeah.
Dude.
The castings for a few other heroes set to appear have been spot on. Eddie Kathegi as Mr. Terrific, Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, my potential future wife Isabella Merced as Hot Girl. Like, we chillin' out here.
It's my girlfriend.
Many people online have complained about Hot Girl being race swapped or being another victim in race swapping redheads across fiction.
That is false.
The Hot Girl you're probably thinking of is Shiera Hall from Justice League and Justice League Unlimited in the DCAU. She was from the planet Thanagar, and she played a role in that one invasion arc. The Hot Girl in the DCU is not that character. The character being adapted in the movie is Kendra Saunders, who in the comics has been a prominent member of the Justice League in modern times, and you'll never guess her ethnicity. Yeah, She's Cuban. I like to think about the opportunity for these comic book suits to fully embrace their comic nature and take one of the only few good elements from the DCEU, which is the costume design. It's about damn time we got a Superman suit with trunks on it, but when it comes to the actual suit itself,
I mean, it's alright, like, overrated as fuck in my opinion. I mean,
some of the opinions surrounding David Cornsweet as Superman and the Henry Cavill comparisons are truly the embodiment of stupidity that resides on the internet. I can't believe they hired a Henry Cavill lookalike. He just looks like a Henry Cavill knockoff.
You niggas is just retarded.
Gee, I wonder which fictional character both of those actors look like. Also, Cornsweet resembles more of Tom Welling to me, if anything. Oh, but he's too skinny to play Superman. Henry Cavill was so much bigger. Yeah, if this is considered too skinny in modern times, then I don't even know what to think. Some of y'all really acting like Cavill was this macho man before landing the role of Superman. Bro had to put on hella muscle. The biggest elephant in the room is definitely the whole James Gunn fired Henry Cavill allegations, or that he doesn't like Cavill. First off, Gunn had been working on his script for his Superman movie before they had even shot the post-credit scene cameo in Black Adam, and the movie was pitched to him as an Elseworlds project, very similar to Matt Reeves' The Batman, in which it wasn't connected to the DCEU. So you have these Warner Brothers executives allowing The Rock to have Henry Cavill cameo, post a video on Instagram about his return, knowing that they're simultaneously allowing James Gunn to cook on the side with a completely different Superman. Also, with his return, Cavill never signed a contract. It seemed like it was just more so a handshake agreement. So when you have Gunn in a position of power to run DC and officially greenlight his Superman project, of course he wasn't going to use Cavill, considering he was never a part of the creative process in the first place. Also, if you were rebooting with a new universe, it would only make sense to recast, and Gunn envisioned a younger Superman for the role, which makes sense if you're building to a minimum 8 to 10 year plan. Henry Cavill currently is 41. You do the math. I know for a damn fact some of y'all never seen David Cornsweet in anything. He's a phenomenal actor. Bro was excellent in Netflix's original shows, Hollywood, and The Politician. Now, when it comes to Superman's age in the film, he's apparently going to be the same age as David Cornsweet himself, so around 30 to 31 years old. While this is not an origin story by any means, this is still a Superman in his earlier years, so maybe like a year 3 if I had to take a guess. The only thing I'm worried about with this is the potential age disparity between Batman and Superman. The Batman we're getting in the DCU is a seasoned veteran, but not so much an old Bruce close to his 50s like with Ben Affleck's Batman. We know this for a fact, considering the movie is going to star him and everyone's favorite Robin, Damian Wayne. It's said to take some influence from Grant Morrison's run on Batman. I wonder how many people know that's actually Dick Grayson as Batman in that cover of Batman and Robin issue 10. This is also supposed to be the proper introduction of the Batfamily, so it'd be wise to expect characters like Nightwing to show up at least for a brief period. So with all these characters and lore established, I'd find it hard for this Batman to be in his earlier years. They could find a way to make it work in which Bruce is still in his late 30s at the latest if he met Talia before he became Batman, and if Damian is around 10 to 12 years of age, because Batman was in his like early 40s by the time Damian Wayne rolled around in Grant Morrison's run. But they made Batman's age like a decade younger in the New 52 with all of the 4 Robins still around, so they'll either condense some of the time frame of the lore or cut out a few Batfamily members, considering the roster is so large. I've seen some pretty popular fan casts for Batman, some of the more notable ones being Alla Richardson or Jensen Ackles. I'd bet money none of those castings are happening. Why? They're too old. Now think about it, right? Jensen Ackles at the time of recording is 46. By the time he gets officially casted as Bruce Wayne in a hypothetical scenario, he'd be like 47, 48. To add on to that, by the time the movie even comes out, he's definitely going to be at least 50 years old.
it's not gonna, you know what I'm saying? It ain't gonna, nah, it ain't gonna work.
Andy Muschietti is set to direct The Brave and the Bold. He served as the director of the Flash movie, and the announcement of him directing Brave and the Bold, I'm pretty sure took place before The Flash even released in theaters.
What?
No, all right. I know that sounds bad.
Personally, I wouldn't be too worried about it as long as they get a talented screenwriter. If Christina Hudson, the writer for The Flash, was on board, that'd be one thing. The idea of 2 live-action Batman coexisting theatrically with Matt Reeves the Batman in the DCU version could either work really well or go horribly wrong. There is no in between. The DCU would pretty much have to incorporate a more fantastical Batman to stand apart from Matt Reeves' universe, as I don't really care to see yet another grounded take on the character. While the new DCU is a reboot, there is some confusion going into all of this. It was stated by James Gunn that there is no required viewing going into the DCU since it's a brand new universe. The DCU doesn't officially start until Creature Commandos. Okay, but here's the thing. The show picks up after the finale of Peacemaker Season 1, where Amanda Waller's daughter, Leota Adebayo, exposed Waller's antics to the general public.
This is all part of a Black Ops program known as Task Force X. It's been running for years out of Belle Reef Prison under the command of a woman named Amanda Waller.
What the fuck?
So you come in with Creature Commandos, where Amanda Waller's hands are tied operationally, as she's no longer capable of getting away with putting human lives on the line to carry out missions. So she assembles a new team via the Creature Commandos. And this is where things start to get weird, so bear with me, I'm gonna need y'all to peek game and lock in. So Peacemaker Season 2 is a part of the DCU, as it's set to take place after the events of the Superman movie. But according to James Gunn, Season 1 of Peacemaker isn't canon to the new DCU.
What the fuck is this nigga talking about?
I was always wondering about this since the DCEU Justice League made a cameo at the end of Season 1 where you saw Ezra Miller's Flash and Jason Momoa's Aquaman, but it's not like you can just skip Peacemaker Season 1 considering the Creature Commandos animated series is a direct follow-up, so is the Amanda Waller spin-off show and Peacemaker Season 2. What I've gathered from all of this is that the canon of the DCU includes the exact events that happened in Peacemaker Season 1 minus the cameo at the end from the Justice League, because that's the only logical explanation I can think of. It definitely seems like most characters are getting recast, with there only being a few exceptions still sticking around, like Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, John Cena as Peacemaker, and the entire Peacemaker cast, and Solo Maraduena will come back as Blue Beetle in the new Blue Beetle animated series that was announced, along with any future appearances of the character in live action. I'd imagine every major Justice League member will have a new face, because not recasting all of them would be such a detriment to this new universe, which includes Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. Keeping her as Wonder Woman in the DCU literally makes zero sense. I fail to understand why people still want her to continue. Now don't get me wrong, I don't mind her as Wonder Woman, and I understand some people thinking she was one of the better aspects of the DCEU, but dude, Batman and Superman are getting new actors. It only makes sense to follow suit with Wonder Woman. It's not like Gal Gadot was the Robert Downey Jr. equivalent for Diana, where it'd be impossible for anyone else to play the character for the time being. Trust me, she's not an A-tier actress in terms of her acting ability. Also, she'd be carrying a lot of baggage from the previous DCEU as the prominent reminder of that horrendous universe. James Gunn on Threads was asked about DCU Wonder Woman, and he pretty much said that she hadn't been cast yet, so it's even more likely that Gal Gadot won't be returning in the DCU. I think this new universe could be a gateway in introducing characters who don't often get the spotlight or haven't been adapted properly in a handful of years. I think it's cool we're getting 2 Superman related movies back to back, with Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow being the second film after Superman, because we all know how bad it's been for Superman in the DCEU. I mean, that's one of the main reasons we're in this reboot mess in the first place. Hopefully the interconnectedness of the universe won't be to its detriment. There's this initiative in having several DCU projects here and there in different mediums, like in animation, live action, and even gaming. If there's an actor voicing a character in animation, like the voice cast for Creature Commandos, they will reprise that same role in live action. Frank Grillo is the voice of Rick Flag Sr. in Creature Commandos, and he's also set to play that same character in Peacemaker Season 2. That could be a good and a bad thing, depending on if there will be future DC projects changed to make it make sense in the context of the DCU, instead of it just being its own thing. But I guess that's what the Oswald's banner is for.
And it's one of, our jobs, mine and Peter's, is to come in and make sure the DCU is connected in film, television, gaming, and animation. That the characters are consistent, played by the same actors, and it works within one story. And if something is outside of that, like Matt Reeves' Batman or Todd Phillips' Joker or Teen Titans Go, that it is clearly labeled as DC Elseworlds, outside of the mainstream DCU continuity.
All I can hope is that this universe works as intended, because the last thing the DC IP needs is another flop. Their reputation has been tarnished thanks to the tomfoolery behind the scenes in the DCEU, neglecting and not properly utilizing their biggest heavy hitters like Superman for such a long time. This could be the chance for general audiences to see DC in the light I've seen it in for a while outside the movies, filled with rich characters and stories that don't always feature Batman 24/7. It would be a damn shame if the DCEU was the last thing audiences remember when it comes to anything related to the larger DC brand. You ask me, any reboot of some sort for this franchise was inevitable. It was just a matter of when.